High Impact Leadership Model for School Renewal as part of the Grand Rapids Southeast Promise Neighborhood Project. High Impact Leadership School Renewal, the why. In studies utilizing national databases, our research team confirmed that individual school is the place where true transformative change happens. Governments and districts set the educational agenda, but the school is where that agenda gets translated to day-to-day practice and learning experiences for students, ensuring that every student experiences high-impact learning practices in every classroom. Every day is the key to positive change in student outcomes. High-impact leadership for school renewal empowers each school with the motivation and capacity to systematically build adult practice and school conditions that bring forth each student's assets and potential to achieve learning success. The Hil principles and practices also build a school-wide culture and system to respond to the unique characteristics of the school's student population, thus creating the conditions for equity of learning opportunity and outcomes. Finally, the Hil School Renewal process creates the school conditions to implement and sustain the evidence-based practices that are high leverage for student success. These features of the Hil model and process will be used by Grand Rapids Public Schools to ensure high integrity and fidelity implementation of the Promise Neighborhood Grant pipeline of positive change initiatives. The what? The left side of the slide shows the Hil theory of action in 3 parts. Hil was designed by our research team to create the conditions for positive change for increasing equity and excellence of learning opportunity and targeted outcomes for all students. The Hil model combines 3 sources of transformative change to achieve student success. First, the Hil model engages principals and teacher leaders in developing school-wide conditions for transformative change through a system of 16 practices organized under 4 leadership principles. Second, the Hil model engages principals and school teams in short, strategic cycles of inquiry to achieve growth targets for students. Third, the Hil model engages school teams in finding and selecting the evidence-based strategies that will work best to achieve growth targets for students the school serves. Hil uses 16 practices that support transformative change for improved student outcomes and equity. Our research team identified these practices through a series of grant-funded projects, several controlled studies, and cross-references to the research of others. These 16 practices support and build transformative cultures and systems in 4 critical areas. First, the school's positive core, grounded in appreciative strengths-based assumptions. Second, a school's collective ownership of the factors for student success grounded in shared responsibility and leadership, social trust, and interdependence. Third, a school's evidence-based inquiry and decisions about what gets priority attention and what gets monitored with multiple forms of data. Fourth, a school's culture for organizational learning grounded in reflective practice, deep questioning, systems of alignment, and adult learning. The design and implementation teams will use the 4 leadership principles to ensure that the recommendations they develop for pipeline initiatives are aligned with the district mission and vision and build upon current strengths and assets, collectively owned and implemented in a safe and supportive culture, generated through robust cycles of inquiry and implemented with progress monitoring that uses real-time and post-hoc data, and supported through systems alignment and a culture of adult and organizational learning. Promise Neighborhood Design and Implementation Teams. The Promise Neighborhood Grant was awarded to Dr. Shen and Dr. Reeves to create a partnership between Western Michigan University, Grand Rapids Public Schools, and 7 other partner organizations to strengthen or add to a pipeline of success supports for children, students, and families in the Grand Rapids Southeast neighborhood. In receiving this grant, we joined a network of Promise Neighborhood projects across the country, many of which are focusing on most of the same initiatives. Promise Neighborhood grantees are supported by a national system of technical support. For each of the Promise Neighborhood grant initiatives, we must establish a baseline picture of how students and families are doing on 10 required federal government performance results acts. GPRA measures. The evidence-based practices identified by the design and implementation teams, in addition to strengthening the implementation of all evidence-based work already happening in the schools and districts, will be our how of making progress on these measures. Hil inquiry process. The design and implementation teams will also follow the Hil inquiry process. In phases 1 and 2 of this approach, they will use the Hil appreciative strengths-based inquiry process to develop a current state district profile for each PN grant pipeline initiative. Then they will recommend growth targets, success indicators, and progress monitoring measures for each of the pipeline initiatives. They will make sure the recommended growth targets are aligned to both the required federal measures and district strategic and MyKIP plans. Next, they will work with internal and external experts and leaders to develop recommended high-impact practices schools can use to achieve the recommended growth targets. With this done, they will present their current state findings, growth targets and measures, and evidence-based practices recommendations to the PN partner leadership teams. Once approved by the PN grant partners, the slate of growth targets, measures, and evidence-based practice recommendations will be shared with the PN grant school teams. School renewal alignment process. This graphic shows the alignment between student, classroom, leadership, and school-wide growth targets and practices for achieving growth targets. It also shows how Hil uses gold standard implementation guides to ensure that classroom, leadership, and support growth targets are translated to observable behaviors. These behaviors become key progress monitoring measures along with real-time student data. The design and implementation teams will focus primarily on phase 2 of the Hil inquiry cycle to establish a current state profile and growth targets across the entire spectrum of birth to college or career development for PN neighborhood students and their families. The Grand Valley State University Johnson Center team has gathered baseline data from all the PN grant partners to start the process of building a current state profile for each of the federal measures. The grant leadership team has also put together a map of current program assets for each of the 5 areas of PN grant initiatives. This will start the process of developing a current state picture for each of the PN Cradle to Career initiatives. Meanwhile, Hil facilitators will be learning what growth or improvement targets each school has identified as a priority focus for the year, and helping the school leadership teams use whatever part of the Hil process fits where they are in their school improvement work. The goal is to have the design and implementation team recommendations ready by January, so Promise Neighborhood schools and partner organizations can align future growth plans to the Promise Neighborhood grant growth targets. Please contact Dr. Pat Reeves if you have any questions about the high impact leadership model for school renewal.